Well, welcome everyone to our final mental health moments in 2020. My name is Linda Golick, and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Consultant here at Bellum Health. And I am joined once again with Charles Latour, our behavior health therapist. Charles, what a year it has been, right?
I know it's a lot of people this week especially have been calling it COVID time, because it's many times of the year seem to go by so slow, but the year went by so fast that it's almost like it went by in COVID time, is how some people have described it, in trying to put some context to the year that it's been. Pretty amazing. So yeah, can't believe that it's December 17th already.
Yeah, unbelievable. And what a privilege it has been, Charles, to do these segments with you. And I think all of us that have been attending these have really gotten some helpful information that we've been able to carry with us as we continue to navigate our lives. And so you had the brilliant idea of really being reflective about that word 2020. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as I was thinking about it, it's pretty amazing that there's an irony or paradox, however you want to look at it, but I think it is really ironic that our way of life with regard to vision, we have always learned that 2020 is like great vision, but the year 2020 has been incredibly unclear. It's been filled with uncertainty, lack of clarity, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what lies ahead, having an abundance of fear, difficulty, wondering, as I've said before, will we get it? And even worse, will we possibly give this virus to somebody else? So it's been a year of struggling to have vision and clarity of where things are, even though 2020 is like supposed to be this great clarity of vision. And I think the paradox to me is pretty incredible. But I was hoping what we could do is add a little bit of clarity to the uncertainty that this year has had, and kind of use part of today to do a couple different things. One is just reflect on if there are things that we have covered, to be able to look at those, put them in context to moving forward. Like, let's do a little bit of a summary of vision. The outlook was unclear. My hope has been that through this time period, we've been able to look inwardly with greater vision, greater clarity to who we are, what we're about, and how we're getting through this 2020 experience, which now is going to be going into 2021. So we might not have a lot of clarity outwardly, but hopefully taking a look inward with greater understanding, greater clarity, maybe 2020 to how we see us is what we can hope for. So that was kind of the idea for this time today.
Yeah, so we really sat down and we reviewed some of the great things that we have learned in 2020, and we came up with a list of the 20 things that will give us 2020 vision that we learned, hopefully in 2020. And it's okay if you haven't grasped all of these yet. We're all a work in progress, and so today we're going to review some of those and just ship us off into a great 2021, I am hoping. So our first couple, Charles, is really about growth. Boy, if I had to rewind the clock and think about where I was a year ago today and where I am now, wow, have we grown, right?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I think even the idea that part of this kicked off with the idea of what can be done. And one of the first things that we talked about was that let's not leave how we get through it to chance. Be deliberate, be developmental, be intentional, be purposeful. deliberately grow. Don't let how we go through this left to the roll of a dice, just chance. The more deliberate we are, as I always like to say, what we monitor and are aware of, we could then modify. So we're intentionally being aware, intentionally being developmental, and hopefully in that way, you can't do that without understanding, looking at, and taking a good, clear sense of who you are and what you're about. So that's the developmental piece. And I think that was one of the first things that we talked about when we even kicked this all off. So absolutely.
Absolutely. And couple key
In the-
phrases had throughout our time together. Don't just go through it, grow through it. Don't get bitter, get better. And I think those are some fun key phrases that have really, really stayed in my head, and I'm so glad to be reminded of that. Our next number. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think those fit nicely into that developmental deliberateness. That if we're not aware of our emotions, we could just hang out in that bitterness, and sometimes even woe is me, woe is us. Can you believe this? And I hear that a lot, and it's easy to go there. That's a very natural thing. It's not as easy to say, okay, this does suck. We'll all agree with that. This is difficult as can be, but what are we going to do? It gives us agency to think that way. It gives us the ability to be able to say, I'm not just going to be a victim to this as long as I can help it. The only victim part of this is if I get it, the rest of it, or friends or family, but the rest of it is how I see me and how I get through it. And I think that even takes us to this next one, number 4, is being able to see this not as a threat, but as a challenge. That threats I succumb to, challenges I get through, and that keeps the growth mindset, which I think it's all about. So absolutely, and that notion is what choice awareness is all about, that I get to say how I react rather than the reaction just happens. So one other thing I think I've said along the way I think fits into this is respond wisely rather than react blindly. That when we're in response mode, we have greater agency of us than when we're just blindly reacting. And that is what choice is all about. That's the idea of choice awareness. Without that awareness, I'm in blind reaction. But with choice awareness, I'm in response effective mode. And that's a positive place to be. So can I hit 6, 7, and 8 as long as we're on this screen, or did you want to say something with that, Linda?
Well, I was going to say, moving into 8, I think another really important thing for us to learn has been the impact that we can have on others. I mean, we can sit and we can complain and we can get negative, but what good does that do to ourselves or others? So I absolutely love number 6. Give a little grace and spread a ray of sunshine. Like, choose to be that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it may have been the August meeting, but someone had mentioned, we were talking, the idea of grace came up, and we've used that as in like 3 ways. How do we get grace? How do we have grace? How do we give grace? And a lot of what I've worked with this whole semester and even the end of last semester is, student athletes or just kids taking classes, tests, so forth, have felt like if these teachers just understood a little bit better what it is to be doing this virtually, they'd even have more grace towards us. And this idea that almost everything is like an AP class, that we are in this mode of that a B could be an A when we're in this mode, that there's grace that we can give all the way around. But at the end of the day, if we view, and one person that I meet with in particular calls this his occupation, that every day I am here to spread a ray of sunshine, a beaming ray of sunshine to other people's lives. In fact, he thanks everybody as he's coming down the hall to my office for being here today. And he feels that if we're all doing that, we are all a ray of sunshine to someone else. I'm going to talk about that more later, but even that ray of sunshine can be a jolt or shot of mental oxygen for us, that we need to have that for ourselves and for other people in this time of physical PPE. We've talked about psychological PPE. How do we can't get a shot literally, but every shot we get psychologically is within our mind, within the way we think. And that's the shot of mental oxygen that I'm talking about. Because at the end of the day, as you've heard me say a number of times through this, we don't have well-being without psychological well-being. So I think all of these go together great. That ray of sunshine, the light of day through the darkness, the grace that we can give each other, and the mental oxygen all make us better, and not only for ourselves, but for other people.
And I think that's been a big one here, in that we aren't going to be well if we don't have that psychological well-being, and that has been a big one. And that really moves us into number 9, where we talked about those 5 pillars to recovery. And I really love this one, because this to me really illustrates those dimensions of well-being. So there's some of that physicality of sleeping well and the nutrition and the hydration. But then we have things like social connectedness and thinking differently and having that open mindset, and just that beautiful balance of those dimensions.
Yeah, and it's amazing that I think these pillars really take into account something that we've highlighted, which is the bidirectional communication between the mind and the body. And I think of this as pillars in the way of like an approach. Like if we approach life with this, it's not telling you have to do these. It's not a go-to recipe thing. It's an approach to life. That if we're sleeping well, we're probably going to feel better. If we're eating well and staying hydrated, we're probably going to be feeling and doing better. If we're getting some movement, some exercise, it doesn't have to be Olympic style training, but getting some movement each day, something targeted. A lot of the research tells us exercise is as good for our brain as it is for our heart. And anything good for our heart is typically good for our brain and our skin. So these are 3 primary areas of our life that we are doing with that when we're exercising. Social connectedness even moves more into the psychological part of it. If people were on the call, maybe 2 meetings ago, we had talked about sometimes you have to be the one to reach out, not just waiting always for the reach out to come to you, that the social connectedness goes in both ways. And the reason I think this is so important and critical all the way around is we're challenged right now in this one, right? The last 9 months, if it's told us anything, is that everything we know can change. Everything we thought was certain can become uncertain, right? And connecting isn't as easy as it was, especially when something we were hearing was social distancing, which I had reframed in the early meetings, which was physical distancing, but stay socially connected. We may have to be 6 feet apart, but we can connect socially in a number of different ways. It may even test and challenge our creativity, but we have to stay connected. And when we talked about stress management, we had talked about the social connectedness and the oxytocin connection, that when we are with and engage with other people, we get the shot of oxytocin, which is one of the most helpful things to us. And when that we are experiencing stress, stress actually wants us to connect and be with the people we love most. So social connectedness, if we know nothing else about the brain, it's that it tells us we're profoundly social. We need that. I described isolation as the new smoking. It takes as much as 5 to 8 years off our life, social isolation. So stay socially connected. And then I think what we've talked about, almost, I would say a good 80% of the work that we have done has been on the psychological mindset, how we think, how that matters to who we are and what we're about. And our wellness is absolutely amazing. I always like to look at it from the vantage point of how we're thinking dictates so much of our life. And an open mindset is part of the key to thinking well. So what's in our mind determines a lot of the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. All about perception. All about perception, what we perceive. So then the next segment, really understanding the difference between the expansive thinking and the restrictive thinking. And I think this has been a big one in 2020 to challenge ourselves in that way.
And this one probably even more than well, along with the next two, really involve the idea of self-awareness. That, am I looking at myself? How often am I thinking of, are my thoughts expanding me or are my thoughts restricting me? And I sometimes use the idea of a goalie in soccer, is that when we feel threat, when we feel stressed, we naturally have the tendency to restrict, to coil up when we're facing threat. And restriction not only is a physical thing, but it's psychologically driven. When our thoughts are worry prone and restrictive, we not only restrict physically, but internally, physiologically as well. So I like to use the example of a goalie, which is if a ball is coming at a goalie, if they restrict like that, they're not going to be that effective. But if they're stronger in a stronger place, they're spread out, they're expansive, and expansive thoughts make us stronger. Restrictive thoughts restrict us. A goalie that's expansive is going to be much more effective. So we're not only helping ourselves physically, we're making ourselves stronger. And that's knowing when our thoughts are worrisome, are restrictive, goal-oriented, expansive, is making us stronger physically and emotionally. And it's the same thing with it that ties into the next one. What's the difference between distress and eustress? It's how you're viewing stress. We talked about the idea that no one gets to determine this but you. You decide what is healthy stress or harmful stress to you. And we talked about the Kelly McGonigal video, How to Make Stress Your Friend, and the research that was done at the University of Wisconsin, which followed people over a number of years. And what they had found was that your view of stress as being harmful is actually more harmful to you than the stress itself. As people are asked, are you under a lot of stress, moderate stress, or little stress? The little stress had as much trouble if the view of stress was harmful as the high stress group. So your viewpoint of stress, your perception matters as much as anything else, comparatively speaking, to how you deal with what's going on in your life.
Absolutely, because the reality is that we're never going to be without stress. I mean, obviously, 2020 with a pandemic has been a different level, but yet we all experienced stress before the pandemic. And one day when we hopefully wrap this up, we'll experience stress again. So this really is a lifelong skill for us to learn how to view it better so that that can be a benefit to us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
So we continued with a little bit more along that path. 13, the greater your ability to manage stress, the greater your ability to expand the limits of dealing with it. Another one just having to do with really learning that skill so that we can help ourselves for the long term.
Yeah, and I look at it as even we can broaden that out. I mean, this one to me is so important, our ability to manage it. This is what expands us, that to our upper level, not only of dealing with the stress, so I love where you're going with it, Linda. It's not only stress, but the outer limits of our capabilities. What are we capable of doing? Stress and challenges in life are the things that threaten us in terms of what we're capable of. It ratchets it down. But when we don't feel it that way, I describe that dynamic of what's more stressful to us, physiologically harmful to us, the thrill of going for an A or the fear of getting an F. Is that the thrill of going for an A is taking us to our outer limits of capability. The fear of an F is taking us down. And that's again looking expansive versus restrictive, our mindset. So when we are dealing with stress in the way of what I'm going for versus what I'm fearing, life gets a lot better for us. I always like to say, be driven less by your fears and more by your dream. So I think this is one. When we're driven by our dreams, we're not only dealing with things better, but we are reaching for what's possible. When we're driven by what we're fearful of and what stresses us, we are more worried about an F than going for an A. So I hope for everybody on the call, part of what they've experienced through this whole process, and even more today moving forward, is let your dreams, what matters to you most, guide you than what you're most fearful and stressed about. So, and then the other one is this idea of controlling the controllables. We've talked a lot about resilience in these programs, and at the heart of resilience is that 90% of everything in life that we experience is out of our control. The only thing that we really at the heart of it can't control is how we think, how we feel, and how we respond to any given situation. So if we hit the ball in the bunker, how do we get it onto the green? Control the controllables, let go of what we can't. And as a result, part of that is what's next. This happened, but what I can control is what I do next. So controlling the controllables. Yeah, I used the term at one time, be freakish about being a control freak, but only on what you can't control, and also freakish about letting go of what you can't. That to me is the new controlling. And I think that gets to the heart of it. And if we're doing these things, we are becoming who we want to be more than who we don't want to be. And that I hope that has also been part of what this journey is. That tests of resilience, like what we're going through, is an opportunity for us to see, am I the person I think I am and want to be, or am I not? That's part of that expanding to upper limits, or I don't get there. And that this is a challenge for all of us to be the most resilient person each of us knows. So I think that's part of the inherent challenge that we are all given in this type of experience that we're going through.
And that is so valuable, you know, that controlling piece. I'll tell you, that took me a few years to like get that one. I know, like in my younger day, that was the source of so much of my stress, was that I was trying to just control everything. And once I realized that there were certain things I had to let go of, my life got a whole lot more peaceful. So we really can do ourselves a favor if we let go of what we can't control. That is a big one. So then the next segment really, I love this because this really ties into kind of the physical wellness, you know, being tied into the mind. Starting that day with some breath so that we're accessing that parasympathetic system. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yes, in fact, I'm going to show something that always makes me think of this. I think I used this in the last example is Most of us start our day with this, or what we're using in front of us right now, the computer, whether it's text, emails, a call, messages. And what I've been trying to encourage people to do through this process and any other one I'm engaged in is basically this idea, which is start your day physiologically in a better place than it would be otherwise. That this idea that one breath can activate the parasympathetic nervous system, start our day with peacefulness and a greater baseline to then deal with whatever else is going to come our way. And I love the breath as a way to do this, anything that we're managing physiologically. The reason being is that the breath is our greatest resource. It's always around us, so it's always there. That's in part why it's our greatest resource. Secondly, we have to do it anyway. We are going to breathe, so we might as well do it effectively. But when we know it with the idea that the exhale longer than the inhale accesses that peaceful part of us, we are even in a better place. So, and then the other things that I really think are important in this is this management part of us. And I think this is when we're getting into specific, concrete things that people can do. Starting your day with a statement of gratitude, something that you're grateful for, and why is incredibly great. It starts our day in a much better place. And when we're intentional, we're turning on that intention that we need to be deliberate. But the mindfulness really at the end of the day is the key. The ability to have your head where your feet are and being aware in the moment, because that matters as much as anything. I referenced that one time an article by a guy named Dan Gilbert at Harvard, who had done a study of mindfulness and this dynamic of when our head is somewhere other than where we are, we're more likely to be unhappy, which was the subtitle of the article, which is a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And when we're focused and we're here, we're in a much healthier place emotionally. And the last one on this page, the whole idea was the most resilient people, it's not about them. The most resilient people actually bring that to other people. This is in part that ray of sunshine, that we're all part of this. And the idea of a rising tide floats all boats is that stress actually promotes caring behavior. When we are reaching out to other people, we are physically getting better. I gave you the example of Dr. Menninger at the famed Topeka, Kansas center, the Menninger Clinic, was asked if you needed to do one thing only to help yourself, what would that be? And he said, go do something nice for someone else. That we get that. And when people are asked to spend $1,000, half the group on themselves, half the group on some worthy cause. The group that did the worthy cause, even 6 months later, still felt better about what they did. So I'm not saying never spend money on yourself or don't think about yourself. We need to, but when we're doing things for others, we are amazingly helping ourselves. So part of resilience is being resilient for other people. And a rising tide does float all boats.
And I think that's so appropriate too at the time of year that we're at with the holiday season at the end of the year. I think we can really reflect on that and ask ourselves, if you're feeling a little bit blue, if you're feeling a little bit down, what a wonderful opportunity to maybe do something for someone else. And it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit them. And it truly is. It's going to float all boats. So that's beautiful. So our next one, 19, was finding your vision or purpose in life. That's kind of a big one. Where do we start with that, Charles?
Yeah, in fact, I want to do an exercise on that to kind of take us from this year to the next year. And a lot of people have this, but I challenge people with this. I was running a marathon And there's a part in it called Heartbreak Hill. And as I was running up, and this is in the Boston Marathon, if anybody's run it, and this is about almost 40 years ago, and the running boom hadn't hit, and you had to be thought of as a little bit kooky or wildly crazy even to even run, let alone run that far. People used to say, why would you run if you're not getting chased by the police or a dog? Because that's what that running was like back then. So it's now obviously much more commonplace. But as people running up this hill, this guy had this big cooler of assorted beverages, primarily alcohol related. As people running up this hill, he was asking everybody the same question, which was, why? 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 And I was pretty focused on the race then. I was a young guy and wanted to get a good time. But a mile or two later, as the wall hits and you're feeling tired, you're feeling sore, I started wondering, like, that was a pretty great question that guy had asked. Why am I doing this? And it gave me pause. It gave me something to think about. It gave me something that I connected to. It got me through the race, and it's got me through the rest of my life, and something I've connected to. And I want to do a little bit of an exercise with all of us before we finalize today. But otherwise, I'll hit the last one, and this is that it's not just be mindful, but practice mindfulness. That when we know that a worried mind is either behind time or ahead of time, which I've said hopefully on at least 2 or 3 occasions, because this mindfulness is key, the acquired ability to know when we're going to worry, to back to now. When we acquire that capacity, one of the greatest psychologists of all time has a residence hall at Harvard named after him, said that any practice or education that we have that can train our attentiveness to go from worry to quiet would be the education par excellence. And at the time, mindfulness wasn't even a concept, but now it is. And when we could practice it, and I say practice because it's something we never completely perfect. We just hopefully keep getting better at it. And that's what, at the end of the day, it's all about. And even something that would keep us guided to our purpose.
Beautiful. And yeah, I just love the whole worried mind is ahead of time or behind time. And we can really ask ourselves that. And I do that sometimes. I wake up in the middle of the night and I start worrying about things. And bring myself back and say, you know what, right now it's time to sleep. And so that's what we're going to do right now. It really helps center you.
It's amazing that when worry is either from something we did or didn't do when we thought we needed to, or something we're going to have to do and we wonder about it, what's going to happen. And neither one we could do anything about, but the one we can is right now. So this quiet mind right now, the acronym I like to use for it is WIN, what's important now, or win the moment now. When we can train ourselves to use that to stay here now, we're usually much more settled, much more quieted. All those worries are dampened down and we're in an emotionally better place. And we do whatever we're going to do better. We function better. And we've talked about Headspace, Calm, or SoundCloud as some strategies or tools that are out there that if anybody wants opportunity to practice it, those are things that can help you in that direction.
Definitely. And then we just had a couple other thoughts that we really wanted to wrap up with. So kind of some of our final sayings above our 2020 things is what we have on this last slide. And so much power here on this as well. And boy, really thinking about every 24 hours as a blessing. Every 24 hours is a gift, and we have a decision on how we can spend that time, right?
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, I think, in part of why this, not even as one of the 20 for 20, 2020 of how we see ourselves, but this brain is the ultimate superpower. I like that in there because it is this statement guides everything else, that when we see and view and experience our brain as our ultimate superpower, that is the thing directing all of these 20 items. And we could have even had 20 more, but we would have had 2 sessions to get through them. But the brain is the superpower, and what lets you see that every 24 hours is the blessing that it is when we view it that way. And the brain is what helps what we think, is that the quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. So at the end of the day, when you change your mind, you're changing your life. And when you change your life, you change the world. And to me, that's what it's all about. And every day that we get up to do it, you have the opportunity to make that change and change the world. So that's how we came up with the list for 2020. So can we do the, I know that time is going to run short. Can we do the exercise?
Yeah, I think we're
All
good.
right. Great. So here's the, and by the way, one thing that I want to say before I forget is that everything on this list is a stress management plan. So by nature, it's a holiday stress management plan. That do any of these and your holiday season will be enhanced. So I wanted to add that in, but I want to do this purpose exercise. I don't have something to draw on, but you'll have to picture what I'm saying a little bit. But this great tennis player, she was the 5th ranked tennis player in the world. And she was expected to go to number 1 and end the year at number 1, but she was struggling and had gotten beaten 2 tournaments in a row in the first round. She couldn't train any harder without risking injury. She couldn't practice anymore without risking injury time on the court. She had trained her body, she had trained her craft to the greatest extent that she could, but it wasn't working. All of her abundant talent, she was stagnated at 5. She was miserable. She was miserable at her coach, miserable with her family, miserable with her trainer, miserable with her agent. And they asked her to talk with a sports consultant. And she reluctantly, 18 years old, thought she knew everything, didn't want to do it, but said, I'll go and do it once, see what it's like. She went to the first meeting, and the first thing she was asked was, my first question to you is, why do you do what you do? And she said, okay, I knew this was going to be a joke. I knew this was ridiculous. That's the most stupid question I've ever been asked in my life. Why do you think I do what I do? I'm a great tennis player. I want to be number 1 in the world. So this consultant coach drew like a little mini, I don't know if you could see this, but a mini tombstone and wrote number 1. And he said, so the most meaningful thing in your life, why you do what you do, is to be number 1 in the world. And she said, no, not really. I'm only 18. So when I die, I could live to be 90. No one then would even know if I was number 1 in the world. So no, that's not it. I said, okay, let's start over. Why do you do what you do? What do you want out of life? What's your life goal? What do you want? Why do you do what you do? She said, well, I guess it's because I make millions of dollars. I make tons of money, and I could buy myself, my friends, and my family just tons of really cool stuff. So we rewrote the tombstone and wrote really cool stuff on it. And she said, you know what? I'm sick of this. All that does is make me seem really superficial. I knew this was going to be terrible. I'm out of here. And the coach said, well, that's fine. In fact, if you don't know this and you don't want to look at this, maybe you don't even need to come back. But you do have an appointment tomorrow if you think about it. So long story short, she came in the next day, a little bit more bounce in her step, a little bit more bright affect. And she said, I gave that thought and I came up with it. But I think it sounds a little goofy, a little silly. And the person said, well, let's hear it. And she said, I figured out why I do what I do. And it is so that I could be a little bit of sunshine in each of my family's life. And anybody who comes to see me play, I could be a little bit of that in their life too. That's why I really think I do what I do. But I think it sounds a little funny. And the person's like, not at all. Everything she had been connecting to was about a skill, conditioning, but she didn't have her mind directed in what really means something to her. And she wound up ending the year #1. The next 2 tournaments, she beat the #1 in the world, who had beaten her 8 straight times. And she went on to stay #1 with that why until a freakish off-court injury ended her career. And for us, everybody on the call, when we are connected to this why, and all of our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions filter through that, we are incredible people and can do even greater things than what we think we're capable of or possible of. And I hope this year of 2020 has given us the opportunity to look at ourselves in the way of who we are and who we want to be, knowing that what is possible for us lies ahead, and maybe even our greatest days lie ahead, and that we don't just get through this, we grow through it, and being all that's possible and all that is capable for us. It might not be the #1 tennis player in the world, but whatever our purpose is and whatever our dreams are, I hope we have been, through this process, somewhat of a catalyst to be able to point the needle in that direction, getting through arguably our most difficult year. And I feel, Linda, that it's been a privilege to work with you and a great pleasure to be able to go through this, and hopefully to be a catalyst for people putting mental health into the PPE equation of how we hopefully stay safe physically and mentally on our journey through the year and our further journey to being the best us. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions, comments, and if there's any questions or comments from the audience.
Yeah, Charles, it has been just such an honor and privilege to do these sessions with you. I know how much you have lifted people up through this pandemic, especially these last 9 months. And so we can't thank you enough. We have learned so much from you, so much from you. I think it has expanded all of us. Someone is asking, who was the tennis player? Do you know who the tennis player was?
It's confidential.
Oh, okay.
I can't say, but if anybody has a guess, you could take a guess. I'll give you a hint. Most people think it's Jennifer Capriati, but it is not.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see if we get any guesses.
Okay.
If anybody else has questions, feel free to chat those in. But we did want to just share one more story with you. So Charles and I were chatting about just how much we have also grown. I always look at Charles as he's the guy that has all the answers. And we were talking about how much we've grown, and I know that I have been working mostly from home. And a year ago, someone had told me I'd be working mostly from home and that I would really enjoy it. I never would have believed them. So I think that's one example of just how we can challenge ourselves and we can put a different lens on things. How about you, Charles? How have you grown this year?
I feel the same way. When I was, so I joke about this with the person who first asked me to do this. I say that when Mary Lou told me, asked me to do this, she calls it voluntold, that it started off with this, a phone, that this is a event that would be held on the phone. I would have 5 minutes and I would talk about mental health. And when she voluntold me to do it, I said, that's fine. She said, great, because you're the person who I want to, and I'm looking forward to you doing it. And that's as far as I thought it would go. Then it was another phone call, I think with another 5 minutes. And then it went to this mental health moment expanded out. And she said, I still want you to do it. This will be great. Thank you for doing it. And then the challenge really kicked in. And the reason the challenge kicked in is it was no longer by the phone. And what maybe most people on this call might not know is that I am 100% totally freakishly camera shy. I hate having my picture taken. I hate being on camera. I hate being on film. It's a phobic reaction to the point that when I have my name tag taken, it was the stressful part of the orientation. So people have joked in the past that I must be in the witness protection program because I've never allowed my picture to be taken. So then I found out that this was going to be live and on a camera. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to do it. There's no way. But I had already talked about part of getting through this is getting better at something. And I thought, and my supervisor had said, we have so many opportunities for these news stations and events, and I'd love for you to do them. And I said, well, I'll give it a try. And this was like a entry or starting into that. And it started out so difficult. The first one that I did, I'm like, there's no way I can do this. But I've gotten through the year and I've tried to use it as a growth opportunity for me. And now I don't think of that part as much at all, as much as I think about what content and what can we hopefully do to keep helping other people get through and grow through and be their best through this pandemic and every other element of life. So that's been my growth experience. So I still want to say I love the camera part at all, and even talking about it a bit more brings me more aware, but I've gone through it and it's been part of the growth process and my trajectory. So I'm thankful for the chance to have been able to go through it.
And Charles, you have just done so beautiful, and thank you for sharing that with us, because I never in a million years would have guessed that, because you have been amazing. And I thank you for everything you've done, because I know that you have helped thousands of people through all the different venues that you've been on. So thank you for taking that risk and being willing to grow with us this year. It's just been so awesome. So awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So I don't see any other questions today, so we will wrap it up. All of us here at Bellin want to wish all of you a very happy and healthy 2021. We hope you have a beautiful holiday season. We will be continuing this mental health moment series in 2021, so continue to look for those invitations as we continue to do more of these.
And my final thing is tying back in the idea of purpose, that this season and this process, as I was going through that exercise, I hope all of you in your own way were saying that for you. What is mine? What am I connected to? why do I do what I do, and who do I want that affect, including me. And that this year, as you go through the holiday season, I wish all of you the warmest, healthiest, safest holiday season possible. And that my holiday wish for you is that you go for all that's possible for you, and that you are connected to what matters most in your life, and that you're following your dreams all the way through. So happy, healthy, safe holiday season. And thank you so much for being part of this. We'll look forward to next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.